to me, you know, I love the documentaries that go chronologically, that tell the story, that stay rooted in the music and the things surrounding the music. And they talk to the right people. They talk to some different people. It's not, you know, some different people giving commentary, not the usual talking heads. That used to make me nuts back in the day when VH1 used to do rock countdown shows. Remember those days? They used to do all those shows, and everyone would be those talking head shows. And every time you'd see the same talking heads. Because, you know, they just, like, it's just like now. Everybody just gravitates to the same people. If you need a rock representative at an award show, you know, call Dave Grohl, call Tom Morello. I mean, it's just the same narrow cast thinking. Nothing against any of these people, but you know what I'm saying. So this was just some different people, different perspectives. They talk to the producers. They talk to the engineers. They show you how they did things. They talk to the musicians. They show the ups, the downs. I'm not a huge Bee Gees fan. That's not my music. I respect what they did. They've a tremendous amount of hit songs. I respect the fact that they write their own material. They're unbelievable singers and all that. But what am I going to lie to you and tell you as a rock guy it's my thing? Of course it's not. But the documentary was fantastic. There were a few people that I saw online pointed out, rightfully so, which I didn't even realize till it was done, that they did not talk about at all Sgt. Pepper's and the fact that the Bee Gees were in Sgt. Pepper's, widely known as a debacle of a movie. Which, by the way, amazingly, I've never seen. I never saw the Sgt. Pepper movie. People tell me I should see it just for the Aerosmith stuff in it. But I've never seen it. Maybe I'll try to watch it soon. But they didn't talk about their involvement in Sgt. Pepper's, but they did talk about, and stuff I didn't know in the documentary. It was like, I didn't realize that they had gotten their start so young, had such early success, and then imploded long before the whole Saturday Night Fever thing. And that was more or less a comeback for them. I didn't even realize that because I was too young to remember them the first time around. So my point of reference with that band was the hysteria of the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, which even when I started working in a record store in the early 80s was still selling in droves. But the whole early years of their formation and everything that went on early on, and then they went off the rails after a few records and then imploded and then came back together. I forgot about the fourth brother, Andy Gibb, and his drug problems and how he came back he was in the fold, and they were actually going to bring him in as a fourth full-time guy at one point before he died of drugs at like 30. Just ridiculously young. The two brothers from the Bee Gees who had passed away, Robin and Morris, they used archival footage for their interview segments. They're in it quite extensively, but obviously they passed away a number of years ago. And it looked to me like the interview footage they may have sourced for their interviews was actually from their Behind the Music episode. I'm not sure, but it felt that way and looked that way. And then obviously, Barry Gibb is still alive and lives in Florida and is in it. Although they use some archival footage of him as well, there is the beginning and end of the film. You see him now. Now, I know his son, Steve, who is at the very end of the film. They show you Barry Gibb playing a festival somewhere in Europe, and Steve plays guitar in his band. Steve is a great dude. He's a friend. I texted him over the weekend after I saw the doc. Steve is a metalhead. Barry Gibb's son is into heavy rock. Steve has played in Black Label Society. Steve was did some stuff with Saigon Kick recently. He's a great dude. We hang when I get to South Florida. So I sent him a message just telling him how blown away I was by the film. And I told him, and I was sincere about it, that it's a great document for the history of this band and for his dad, that his dad is the sole surviving member, to be able to participate in it and to see this happen, this great document of this amazing story of music be told and be done in such a great way. I thought was a great thing for his dad, and I was really happy that that was able to happen for him. So I can't recommend it more highly. Again, I understand I do a rock show, but you know by now, it doesn't matter. You gotta, if you love great docs, watch it. And I'll say this, the other thing that was touched on pretty extensively in the documentary was the whole disco demolition thing. Because they did a great job of juxtaposing what was going on at the time. The Bee Gees at this point were headlining stadiums off of the success of Saturday Night Fever, the movie, and of course the soundtrack, which they did. So they are at the height of their career. Private planes pulling 50, 60,000 people a night. The pinnacle, the peak of popularity that you could attain in music. And at that very same time, brewing under them is the backlash to disco. And the Bee Gees didn't even know that they were getting put in the disco category. They openly considered themselves to be a pop band, but they talked about how there's a fascinating moment where they talk to the producers who talk about how they captured the drum loop and basically came up before the technology existed to loop drums with how they came up with a drum loop. They show you them doing it, running the tape around equipment in a studio now. And it was a very innovative thing that helped, solidify their disco sound. But they never considered themselves like a full-on disco act, even because they predated it. But even though the music they were making at the time fit the bill and was heavily featured not only in Saturday Night Fever, but in dance clubs around the world. So all of a sudden, they're pigeonholed as disco, and while they're at the peak of their career, the backlash to disco begins. And if you're old enough to remember it, disco sucks was the mantra at the time. There were t-shirts, there were bumper stickers, and there was a notorious event that took place in Chicago by a local DJ from that area named Steve Dahl, who told all these people that they were going to blow up disco and disco needed to be put an end. He's from the rock station there, and had people come into the stadium, and if they brought with them a disco record, they would get in for like 75 cents or whatever the frequency of the radio station was. And he put it was a double header. He put all the records in center field and blew them up physically, like with fireworks or whatever. And it became this huge rallying cry of disco sucks and let's get rock back sort of vibe. And it was spearheaded. It was a promotional stunt by a local rock station. Because like anything, and we've seen this with every genre of music, when something gets really, really big, inevitably there becomes a backlash to it. And they touched on it in the documentary. Inevitably there becomes a lot of really bad imitators of what was going on. They pointed to that ridiculous song, Disco Duck, and they show you footage of the video in it, and it's ridiculous. And they were like, it had gotten too much, and the disco sucks backlash happened. So right when the Bee Gees are being heralded as, even though they didn't try, the kings of disco, and in stadiums in Chicago, they're blowing up disco records, and the backlash begins. And even as big as the Bee Gees were, they got swept up in it as well. So that was a really, as a rock fan, that was a really interesting thing to see. They're commentating on that and how they juxtaposed that in the film. There's just endless great stuff in it. I can't recommend it more highly. It was done by a really heavy Hollywood guy who's produced major, major films named Frank Marshall. And it shows because, there's a million documentaries out there there's a million things. If you go on Amazon or Netflix or whatever, you'll see all kinds of people doing documentaries on all sorts of things.